there's actually quite a bit of news. We have some news about a new, I guess not necessarily new. We've talked about it, but it's going to be kind of converted into animation. But real quickly, I want to talk about some potential news and what this could potentially do to good old HBO. And that is, there are rumblings, Jimmy, more and more and more, that another merger is going to be happening with the parent company of A Song of Ice and Fire, which is, HBO, which is Warner Brothers, which is Warner Brothers Discover, that it might be merging with Paramount.
Yeah, this is pretty major. I'll be honest, every time this happens, I get super duper nervous that HBO is going to get messed with. Like, that's the worry.
Yeah, so I also find it interesting that we're talking about animation, because if this merger is like Warner Brothers and Discovery merging, okay. Warner Brothers and Paramount, I don't know. I kind of see the FTC stepping in and saying, no, too big. They would have a complete monopoly on like kids cartoons, because they would have Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. You would have like a pretty mega sports monopoly with like TNT basketball and then the CBS. I could see that. But if Warner Brothers is going to merge or get bought out by anybody, then I think Paramount is the best option. I'd much rather that than they were talking about like Comcast, Universal, NBC. Yeah, absolutely not. So they actually, a lot of Warner Brothers TV shows, because they don't have like one of the antenna channels, a lot of their shows air on CBS. Like that's typically been their mega partner, like Big Bang Theory, stuff like that. Like a lot of their like sitcoms, stuff like that, are like Warner Brothers sitcoms, but they air on CBS. So they kind of already got that partnership going. But I could see this being beneficial because Nickelodeon obviously they have a bunch of great animation studios, and animation is really expensive. So that could tie into our kind of big news here, which is George Martin said that the Corlys Velaryon show, the 10,000 ships, right, that we've been talking about, is, or 9 voyages. Sorry, the 10,000 ships is the Nymeria show, but he's saying it's gonna be moving over from live action to animation.
I think that this is maybe a symptom of two things. One, animation getting more popular among the adults, especially as us millennials grow up and other generations. It's definitely increasing in popularity. But two, there's another reason for this, and it's almost like a double dipping of sorts. And the reason why I'm saying this now is because we're seeing a lot of animated series that are getting a good run and then becoming live action. And it used to be always a nightmare. It never worked very well. But there have been some counterexamples, the most recent of which obviously is One Piece. One Piece live action show has been a massive success. So I think that there's a possibility that they're saying, well, these shows, we're not as sure that they're going to be, the hits that House of the Dragon was, Dunk and Egg will be. So let's put them on animated, see if they can gather a following, and then maybe spin it into a live action.
Yeah, and honestly, the thing about this is, I know like Warner Brothers has been kind of like, they've been shelving, like there's like a Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote movie or something that they were planning on doing.
It's gone.
Yeah, and I guess potentially like somebody can come pick it up or buy. I don't know. That's kind of what I was reading, is like somebody can step in and like kind of like pick that up and distribute it if they want. But like really the best partner, what I would be okay with is them licensing out some of these things. Like they've been licensing out some Batman stuff to like Netflix, like Batman animation and stuff like that. Man, we've talked about it before. I would love, we've been talking about like the Ice Dragon, some of these other animation projects he's been talking about, Netflix to handle it, because Netflix they did like a Witcher like prequel animation thing that was amazing. Obviously, we've talked about the Castlevania series before, and Netflix is now going to do a like new animated version of One Piece.
Yeah, that is interesting, because it's actually going to be from the studio that did Attack on Titan, which, no matter what you think of that show, the animation is absurdly good.
Right.
That's a whole nother can of worms that I could get into, because they're going to have to get the original voice actor. They got a lot of work to do to make that in good faith for the people who love the anime and have for 20 years. But yeah, I mean, there is some major studios that are doing great work. And another animated show, by the way, that has done tremendous numbers and people are loving is Blue Eye Samurai. 100% on Rotten Tomatoes and 8.8 on IMDb. And George R. R. Martin said as good as anything in Westeros, by the way. I mean, he says that he watched it and he loved it. And it's on Netflix, and I really recommend people check it out. I've only watched the first episode and thought it was incredible, but it's a TV show. So there's just a lot of excitement right now around animation. And selfishly, by the way, I hope that these shows do well because I think for the next 20 or so years, the only chance of us getting any kind of remake of the television show and maybe, you know, an amended ending will be through animation.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd be fine with a different studio handling as long as George is involved. Right?
Yes, or Ryan Condell. Yeah.
Exactly. And the only place I see that happening is Warner Brothers or Netflix, because as far I don't think I'm not 100% up to date on like the Paramount side of animation.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty much only Nickelodeon, but you know, like Warner Brothers at least has like Adult Swim. Like they have some pretty like adult animated shows that they do anyway. There's like the Harley Quinn show that's like very rated R. And it's hilarious. That show has some incredibly funny moments just from like clips and things I've seen. But you know, Netflix is the other one, so I could see that kind of being the thing here. And here's some quotes from George about this. So he, as you said, he was talking about this Blue-Eyed Samurai. He said, you know, it reminds me of some books I read. What was the title of that series? Something about a song. Never mind. Blue-Eyed Samurai is very much its own thing. It's magnificent. Even if you don't normally watch animation, give it a try. If you like my stuff, I think you'll love it. As it happens, HBO and I have our own animated projects set in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. None of them have been greenlit yet, but I think we're getting close to taking that next step with a couple of them. When this last round of development started a few years ago, we had 4 ideas for animated shows with some great talents attached. Writers' rooms, summits, online, you know, scripts followed in due course, but alas, 2 of the original projects were shelved. And he's then gives a little note about what he's talked about shelved rather than killed. Like nothing, he says nothing's really ever dead in Hollywood. It just gets shelved, and you know, sometimes it can get taken off a few years later. He says, I still have hopes of presenting the stories that we shelved in another form, perhaps as graphic novels. Work on the other 2 animated projects continues. However, and meanwhile, we have moved 9 Voyages, our series about the legendary voyages of the Sea Snake, over from live action to animation, a move I support fully. Budgetary constraints would likely have made a live action version prohibitively expensive, with with half the show taking place at sea and the necessity of creating a different port every week from Driftmark to Liss, you know, all the places, well, and on and on. There's a whole world out there, and we have a lot better chance of showing it all with animation. So now we have 3 animated projects underway. Will any of them make it to air? Happen? No way to know. Nothing's certain in Hollywood, but if it does happen with 1 or 2 or all 3 shows, I hope we can make them as good and as gorgeous and gripping as Blue Eye Samurai. We'll try for damn sure.
Yeah, I mean, George seems very optimistic about this. And I think it's kind of neat, especially from someone who's coming from the old school Hollywood, you know, I mean, coming from stuff like The Twilight Zone and then obviously in Game of Thrones and his other stuff, to see him be able to say, you know, animation might be a good way for some of these stories to get told should give us some sort of confidence going forward. And I don't know. I like this.
I agree. I think once we get the first A Song of Ice and Fire related animated show, depending on how it does, it just opens the door for more, essentially. You know, I mean, I think when you look at anything Warner Brothers does, which includes HBO, the big thing is DC. I mean, they crush it on animation.
Yeah.
Over there. I mean, the people kind of don't know about this, but there's an entire, like, you know, you look at the MCU and the DC, they have like a 15 movie arc, like that's all animated. That's like a DC universe arc. That's like, it's good. Like the whole thing is like really good. I mean, it's way better than the live action movies we got in that same span of time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you really could begin to build something here, and that's only going to help build interest, build people that want to come, you know, see it. You know, if you do something that can be shown, like, you know, on syndicate, because they show anime on like Adult Swim and stuff like that, so that can be like, you know, you could do something like that where it's broadcast to like a wider audience than just say HBO or Max. like even bigger because it's like on television. I mean, you could seriously begin to create stuff and flesh out the world. And there's so many different stories you could tell and do with good animation and make things bigger and grander. And it's just so much. It's so much easier to write. Of course, it's expensive. It's really expensive, and it takes a long time to do. Probably takes longer actually than like filming stuff in live action
Anymore, I don't know, but it does take a long time. Like if you look at the League of Legends show that was very successful, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it was on Netflix, and it was, a lot of people loved it. It's been like, I think almost 2 or 3 years since season 1, and they're saying next year it'll come out. So it does take a while, but anymore, I mean, it's almost 2 years between seasons now for premium television shows.
Yeah. So